Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Manic Mondays portion of Wrestle Plug, where we delve into the retro nonsense that is wrestling. And of course, you will all know by now that we are on the journey of the year 2004. The time machine is stuck, and it makes it stop August the 15th, 2004, at the Air Canada Centre in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, for WWE Summerslam 2004. I'm your host, Amir, and joining me, of course, is Steve.
Yay! Steve! We're dropping the surnames.
Steve.
We're like Cher. We're fucking Shakira.
You're
and
like Cher.
Shakira. You see how topical that is because of the Super Bowl? It's probably going out like.
Did you see it? Have you seen the halftime show? Everyone's kicking off about it, saying it was too lewd. You've got to watch it as a red-blooded male. Like, there's a scene where Shakira just basically dances pretty much naked with a rope. And I was like, this is the greatest halftime show of all time.
But didn't like fucking, what's his face? The twat last year who like sang the whole fucking set with his shirt off for no reason in February. Like, no one's kicking off about that. We got to see some man nips.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone was
Adam
like,
Levine.
oh my god, Adam Levine, that's the cunt. And it was like, oh my god, it's so lovely. I was trying to think of the name of that group, but I just
I'm more a fan of Magenta 6.
Yeah, Magenta 6 are outstanding, mate. Shed 7 from the 90s. Get on Shed 7.
Shed 7 were fucking awesome, mate. Yeah, no, it was, yeah, never mind the rest of this. Talk about the halftime show. So, yeah, no, it was Shakira and J-Lo. J-Lo, apparently it took her 10 hours to get ready, and she did a strip pole dancing segment, and Shakira did this incredible segment, as you can imagine, doing like belly dancing with red hot lights on her. Yeah, no, and even Demi Lovato, who, by the way, is also fine as fuck, came out and did a little bit of and everyone's like, yeah, worst halftime show of all time. It's like, really? Like, it was unapologetically Miami. You know, seedy, naughty, and Latin. Everything you want from a night out. And everyone's just kicking off about it. I was like, gee, you Americans are triggered by fucking everything.
Literally are. Literally are. Fucking pathetic. Stop it. Chill the fuck out.
Patrick Wholesome Mahomes. That's what they want.
Yeah, Wholesome Mahomes. Oh, what a...
He's just the right shade of brown, isn't he, America? Just the right shade of brown. He's a mocker, and you like yourself as a mocker. But as soon as somebody brings out the full Americano experience, you lose your shit. That's why Richard Sherman's hated. By the way, Richard Sherman, I don't know how wise you are to American football, but you are literally his soulmate. He is such an arsehole. You would love him. He's amazing, but he's so talented, you have to forgive him for it. He's basically Zlatan, but for defensive American football. That's what he is. So he'd be great in wrestling. Him and Conor McGregor going after each other, white versus black, be phenomenal stuff. So yeah.
White versus black. That's how Vince McMahon would bill it as well. White versus black. Race war.
They're onto something here.
WWE Race War. It's like Survivor Series, but with the Clan.
He's mate, how amazing. You could just see Vince going, I've been reading this book on American history, and I think we should have a faction called the Clan. Here, this is great. You'll never get this. This is money. We should put pillowcases on their heads because that's money.
They'll be the best good guys. They'll get cheered in every arena in the South.
Fucking Tennessee.
Fucking Alabama. Alabama's biggest baby faces, the Clan.
Do you know where it is a nice place? Canada. Canadians is apparently some of the loveliest people on
they're
earth.
so polite, right?
They have this incredible reputation, don't they, Carl Wilkinson? This incredible reputation for being nice people. So explain yourselves when this date in 2004 came along. Because, my God, you shitty... This is like on a level with Chicago. I've never seen anything like it. Now, Toronto's always regarded as a bit of a noisy town, but not a smarky town. Not this bad. Like, fuck me.
Just shat on everyone. Like, even good stuff. Like, we had Kurt Angle versus Eddie Guerrero on this show. This should be Smart Central. Everyone should be fapping. They're getting out and out wrestling match. And was like, nope, fuck you. Shove it up your ass.
What we want is men in camouflage versus midgets. That's what we and that's what you got as an opener. The Dudley's Trio versus Rey Mysterio, Paul London, and Billy Kidman. What an opener for what is essentially your second biggest pay-per-view of the year.
Yeah, really weird. This should have been on Sunday Night Heat, but that spot was taken by RVD versus Rene Dupree. fucking state of it.
Oh, Christ.
Yeah, no, this was, I mean, it was a fine match for what it was, but Spike Dudley as a heel is really weird. It's a really weird dynamic. Like, he's not doing a bad job. Yeah, he's not doing a bad job or anything. He's doing all the right things, but you're kind of like, but you're not really a bad guy, are you, Spike? You're a nice kid, really, and I know you're trying to be a heel in the cruiserweight division and stuff, but you're a good kid, really. And it was this weird thing where he's like commanding Bubba Ray and Devon as to what to do. So it's like such an odd dynamic to watch. It just really didn't work what that felt like? For me.
It felt like the budget B-Tech version of that Black Woman and the Bashams.
Yes. Yeah.
Like just kind of like, just do as you're fucking told, Dudleys. I've just got this image of like Spike Dudley gets back home and he's got his feet up on Bubba Ray and using Devon's mouth as an ashtray while he's got them both on leashes.
Just sitting there in got them in gimp masks and they sleep in cages.
Yeah, Buddy Ray does strike me as the gimp from Pulp Fiction. Yeah. He definitely does. Whenever I look at Buddy Ray, a little part of me thinks about uncomfortable situations involving black men and sodomy.
Yeah, Bruce Willis has definitely been buggered at some point in the Bubba Ray Dudley household.
Yeah, no question. Absolutely no question. So yeah, no, but I've got to say, honestly, quite an entertaining match for what it was for, random guys. I was reminded how great the WCW guys were. Kidman and Mysterio. Yeah. Like, Kidman, wickedly underrated in this era of wrestling, I felt. Like a very good worker, moved around the ring quite nicely, just so devoid of charisma, which I guess is why he never got further. But, I liked it. I actually did. I thought it was really good fun. And ultimately, just a fun little throwaway opener to get the crowd warmed up, and the crowd seemed to reciprocate it well. They were hot as houses for the whole show, so fair enough. Reasonable stuff. Cruiserweight DNA, I think, helped save this match from being a bit shit, so gave it 2.5 out of 5. Thought that was reasonable for an opener. Till death do us part, Steve. Till death do us part, indeed.
Yeah.
The winner.
The wrestling stipulation.
So you went off. You went off at the last pay-per-view about rape, basically, and McMahon's use of it as a device. Well, here we have it. So you imagine the scenario. A woman's been through a lot. She's been used. Essentially, she's been forced to have sex with somebody. So, I hate to break it to most of male America, but that still classifies as rape. And, she's been forced to go through all this with Kane. She sees her loving man that she was trying to protect while being raped. This is the storyline, by the way. This is how we're seeing this. She's seen him garner this incredible victory in a no disqualification match. And now the liberty of her being married is now up for grabs. Like, she doesn't get a say. Oh, you're going to marry the winner of this match. Like, she may not even want to marry Matt Hardy. Do we not stop to think that she might just be happy being boyfriend and girlfriend or even engaged? No, absolutely not. Fuck you. You're pregnant. Oh, turns out, by the way, you're pregnant courtesy of the rape. So, irregardless, you're going to have a child with the rapist. God, this is wonderful stuff. You could just see Vince McMahon, right? I could just see all of his creative team weeping while this is going on. It's so horrible. Vince is like, but it's money. Isn't that right, Pat Patterson? Pat, get your dick out of that man's ass. Pat, get over here. This is funny, right? Like, this is just terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. And Matt Hardy and Kane are the troopers of the show, isn't they? Go out there and fucking wrestle, and the winner is going to marry Lita. And ultimately, just like last time round, not bad at all. Actually, quite a good match, but this time a lot shorter. And this is a premise with the first kind of 7 matches. Get shitting quick because we got a lot to get through.
Yeah, it's weird, the chemistry, actually. The Kane and Matt Hardy, they had good chemistry. Like, they actually worked really well together. And it's one of the kind of forgotten rivalries because it was buried in this shit creative. It was fucking terrible.
Not a fan of the rape angle, huh?
No, not so much.
Funny that.
Again, like, in like the middle, like you watch a film set in like fucking medieval times, like fucking knights, and we're going to joust for the princess's honor, and whoever wins this joust will win the princess because she's an object, a prize for the father to give away to random man in a helmet. That is basically what this was. Like, you're just expecting, like, Lita's dad to be the king of fucking Mexico, just sat, it's like S.A. Rios giving Lita away for fucking Kane or Matt Hardy. It's absolutely.
What an image of that. Somebody draw it out for me.
Mate, can you imagine if they'd have done that at, like, the wedding of Kane and Lita? S.A. Rios gives her away. Would have been incredible. And it turns out it was his baby all along because incest. Just mental. Absolutely fucking ridiculous angle. But they do pull out a decent match despite it. And yeah, Kane and Matt Hardy actually worked really, really well together. And weirdly, you know, if kind of we'd have been able to have broken Matt at an earlier stage of his career, because this is like version 1, isn't it?
V1.
I actually think Kane being sort of going to like the Hardy compound would have actually been some really, really good stuff.
Oh my God.
Back in the day, it would have been really fucking entertaining. But no, we never got that, unfortunately. But yeah, this actually worked out fine. This was actually a pretty decent match, despite the shocking creative.
Yeah, there's also the added caveat of at the end, Kane's like, "Give me a hug." She's like, runs away, galloping away. When she ran away, the way she ran away as well was awful. Because Lita is literally one of the most hilarious people I've ever seen run in wrestling. Whenever she's in a rumble or whatever. And when she was running away, all I could think about was that episode of Family Guy where Stewie goes, "Look at him, doesn't he run like a Welshman?" Ridiculous. But like you say, the match was really good. I gave it 3.5 out of 5. I thought it was really entertaining, and just two troopers who, despite the content, were like, we're going to make the most of this, we're going to make it fun, and they went out there and delivered a pretty good match, actually, just like they did last time. So kudos to those boys. Randy Orton's backstage. Looking I like this because literally we go from Lita running away to Randy Orton just kind of whimsically staring into the camera like, I wonder what would happen if I decided to force myself upon a woman, or God forbid, shit in their kit bag. But we'll see later down the line. So yeah, he's just backstage, and then you must have loved this when John Cena came along and started giving him the business. He must have been like, "Fuck you!" John Cena.
And just so the epic fucking saga of the longest running rivalry with the most fucking matches ever begins. We see the seed sown.
Well, oh no, this is the first of 482 collisions between John Cena and Randy Orton. Like, where it all begins. Again, and again, and again.
It never stops beginning.
It never stops.
Genesis.
It never stops.
Randy Orton and John Cena.
Yeah, and this was just as terrible as the 400th iteration. He just thought, Randy Orton's not a very good talker, really, at this point, and John Cena has got plenty of penis jokes, but he's like, hey, crowd, do you like Randy? Boo. Looks like they don't like you too much, Holmes. S.A. He just throwing these random appropriate
racial,
At this point, I've had enough. Like, I was at the start of this, I was like, yeah, Doctor of Thugonomics, that's funny, because he's a white man pretending to be black, and it's hilarious. And now I'm like, yeah, fuck off. I'm so tired of it now. Like, I'm back to your level where I'm just like, yeah, this isn't funny anymore. You're just a dickhead, and you're actually making me realise that I hate you twofold, because I'm not a huge fan of yours now, mate. Now I'm thinking, Jesus, you can't wrestle that well. And how was this ever as popular as it was? People loved it. And that really is a damning indictment of how shit the wrestling fan is as a whole. Because let's be honest, this is not entertainment. Like, if you take this footage and sit your parents down and go, hey, Mum and Dad, look what I've been watching. They literally punch you around the fucking chops. Like, my parents would have fucking damn near sodomized me for watching this shite if I'd watched this as a kid. Like, absolutely atrocious, mate. Like, fucking appalling levels of entertainment. It's not funny. It's not funny, and it's not entertaining. It's entertaining in the same way watching a deer smash off your car is entertaining. That's the level of entertainment it is. You're watching it, but really, there's nothing good that will ever come out of this. But ultimately, you're still forced to watch it.
It's like John Cena saw, like, he went, so I'm going to watch all the promos that The Rock ever did, because I want to be funny, and I want to be entertaining, just like The Rock. So I'm going to sit and watch loads of Rock promos and try and do the same thing that he did so I can get to the top. And he saw it, like, he just ignored everything The Rock did until The Rock made a joke about his strudel to Lillian Garcia, and he was like, that's it, that's money, I'm going to do that again and again and again. This is brilliant. Dicks everywhere. The people's strudel. The Cena strudel. It's just fucking shit. It's so overdone. All he does is dick jokes and homophobic references. Like, that's it. Just like, rah, you're a gay. You like men. You're a bum boy. Hey, batty boy. Marmite Miner over there. A brown banana farmer.
He's a shit Ali G. That's what he is. Yeah. Terribly executed Ali G. That's what I've just realised.
In 2004, Ali G was fucking done in 2004. Like, Ali G had already been and gone by the time 2004 rolled around. Like, Ali G had stopped being cool and, like, wasn't on TV anymore by about 3 years before this. And John Cena's like, I've just seen Ali G. This is fucking brilliant. If he'd said Booyakasha, which he probably did if I went back through the archives, like, honestly, Sacha Baron Cohen should sue him for gimmick infringement. That's a fucking great shout. He'll be Borat when he comes back next.
Yeah, and imagine, like, you're thinking, he's culturally appropriating somebody. So who should we get as the heel? A black man. Brilliant. Booker T. Get in there, boy. Best of 5, the first match in the best of 5 series to determine the undisputed United States Championship, not just the United States champion. Like, they're going to be champion anyway. Like, undisputed doesn't need to come into this. And also, best of 5. Like, Booker T's got a rich history of these, hasn't he? Twice he was in a best of 7 series against Chris Benoit, which, well, he's probably the only person to ever come out alive from a best of 7 series of Chris Benoit, but that's another story. Moving on, Redacted. This is another match, just like the last 2, where it's a case of, it's all right, but they're given very little time, and it ends really abruptly. Like, Booker T spends a lot of the match kicking the shite out of John Cena, and then he just kind of gets caught in the FU and done. And you think, oh, okay, well, that was 7 or 8 minutes. Thanks for that, lads. Like, it never gets going. 6, okay. Minutes, well, it's just it never really gets going, and I feel sorry for Booker T because he's one of those guys. He gets better and better as the match goes along, tells a better story, gets involved in the psychology more. And here he is with John Cena. You can even see, like, at the beginning of the match, I love Booker T's genuine look of enragement whenever he sees John Cena, as if to say, fuck you, my culture and my people literally tolerated 200 years of slavery so that you could come along and be the fucking cockwomble that you are. And he's just looking at him like, I'm going to fucking fill you in, sucker. He just look at him. He genuinely doesn't like this. It's quite funny, but ultimately it's quite sad as well. And yeah, 2 out of 5, just because it was just a bit meh. I actually thought it was all right. It was all right, but it just wasn't great. And I thought Booker T put in a lot of work into making himself look like a good heel and worked hard to try and get Cena over. But then, it's just shit. And it's indicative of John Cena's booking throughout his entire career. Takes a shit kicking, but always comes out on top. What's the point? What is the actual point of this?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that makes it difficult to watch in hindsight, because we've seen that career. But at the time, obviously, they're still building him up. He's very much on the fast track to superstardom at this point, and he is super over. Even with, like, the smarkiest crowd of all time, he is over. Like, he had a good thing going in terms of it. The crowd responded to it in a really positive way. They did, fuck knows how, but they did find it entertaining. I never did. But, it was an okay match. But when you look at, these are 2, Hall of Fame guys, and they put on just an average 6 minutes in the mid-card. Like, it's actually quite jarring to think of, really, at SummerSlam. You've got, your second biggest pay-per-view of the year, John Cena versus Booker T. When you say that now, you expect that to be a pretty main-level match, and we've covered shows only a couple of years after this where it is literally a main event match for, titles. Both the guys are champions and that kind of stuff. But at this point, it's just a fuck-around match in the mid-card, and yeah, really, really weird. They didn't actually have particularly great chemistry either. Like, it was okay. It wasn't a bad match, but it did not make me emote in any way. It was just like, all right, it was fine. And now it's over. Move on.
Yeah, Booker T, very much looking like Marmite in everything we've watched him in, from the Alliance to this. Like, I love him, and he's always going to be a legend to me. But there's very much a feeling of he either works magic with you or he just doesn't work with you. Like, it's just one of those sort of things. He doesn't tend to really have... He either has bad matches or amazing matches. Very rarely do I remember seeing a Booker T match and thinking, that was all right. He is that kind of guy.
Yeah.
And this is a real sharp indicator of that. Teddy Long backstage calls Eric Bischoff a cracker, which is interesting, to say the very least. Like, going the other way of, I guess, Vince McMahon was like, well, we'll allow one of you to get a crack in, why not? I'm feeling equality like today, so Teddy Long.
I'm about to say the N word anyway, so fuck it. Let's just shove it out there.
Get your money's worth, you filthy black bastard, Teddy. Like, you could just see it. You could just see it's terrible. Fuck you, Vince. Fuck you. So yeah, calls him a cracker, and it's, you know, they're egging it on, aren't they? Because, faction rivalry coming up, maybe. So yeah, just SmackDown versus Raw nonsense. Also, Teddy Long viciously defending Eugene. I was like, oh, go fuck yourself. Like, you of all people would be far more intelligent to deal with that horse crap, but everybody's having it shoved down their throat.
What a weird career Teddy Long has had. He's gone from being the Uriah Rennie of WWE and the fact that he's the only black referee to going to being the fucking general manager out of literally nowhere. It's such a bizarre career trajectory that Teddy Long had, man. What a man. Heroic.
Teddy Rennie. Incredible. I'm never going to forget that as long as I live. The following contest is for the Intercontinental Championship. Edge defends his belt against Chris Jericho and Batista in a triple threat match. And I thought, oi, banger alert. I was looking forward to this. This is where the crowd suddenly becomes quite divisive. So all of a sudden they're like, oh, Edge is from Toronto, is he? Well, now fuck you. We're from Toronto and we're not as shiny and as good looking and as good at you at everything that you do, so fuck you, Edge. We're going to support Jericho, and a small amount of us are going to support Batista because he's big and shiny and muscly. But fuck you, Edge, you piece of shit. I hate the fact that you're so good at your fucking job. Fuck you. It's such a weird thing. The crowd are like all over him. All over him. And
he deals with it really well.
Awesome. He does. He handles it absolutely beautifully. And, you know, just another indication of why, for me, he's one of the greatest of all time. He's absolutely... And Jericho as well, to be fair. There was very much a theme in this match of protect Batista. He's very green. Just let him just do that. And ultimately, it actually works quite well for him. You know, he gets dispatched a few times, and ultimately, when he is in, he's a wrecking ball, hits lovely spine busters, things like that. This is a nice match, but it's nothing more than that for me. It's just nice.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good match. It's not a barn burner by any stretch of the imagination, but... you know, they're probably all a little bit thrown off by the fucking crowd, just completely and utterly changing the dynamic. But they all handle it very well, as you say. Like, Edge's smile at the end when he goes away with, like, having defended the belt, and the crowd are just throwing feces at him or whatever. He's just standing there with that little, like, heel smile. And that was where you looked at him and went, he is a natural heel. That was where he was on his way to being, like, the rated R superstar. Like, he was on his way to being the top guy as just a complete and utter arsehole dick. Like, it's complete, and in a very different way to how he was a heel as part of Edge and Christian as a tag team as well. But yeah, fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really good match, actually. As I say, not a barn burner, but a good change of pace, particularly coming after that Cena Booker T kind of meh fest. This actually was really good by comparison. But yeah, you would expect it to be with the talent in the ring. As you say, Batista still looked very green, but, you know, consummate professionals in Jericho and Edge with that greater bit of experience did well to cover it on the whole.
Yeah, I gave it 3.5 out of 5. Thought it was very good, but ultimately the reason I've just said nice is because it's just too short again. It's a real problem with so many matches, and I would find out pretty soon why. Because a certain individual, he needs a lot of time to get over his story. So, you know, following contest is what we're all here for. We live for it, don't we? Eddie Guerrero versus Kurt Angle is in the middle of the card with nothing on the line but pride. Phenomenal promo, by the way. Love the promo. Love the almost kind of face insinuation of you're a criminal. And I hate the fact that you were champion. A champion like, you shouldn't be a champion because you're a goddamn criminal. It was brilliant, really good. Slightly racist, but it is what it is. But, delivered beautifully by two world-class wrestlers. And they go out there, and this is basically Kurt Angle getting his win back from WrestleMania. It's a great match. It's a phenomenal match. It's one of the best matches on the card by far. But ultimately, again, a little bit short and not quite as good as WrestleMania. I don't feel like maybe the gravitas of it, not being at the biggest pay-per-view, not being for a title. Ultimately, Luther Reigns being at ringside for me kind of dulls it down a bit as well. I just felt like, what are you doing here? Like, I don't care about you anyway. You add nothing to this match. This is a case of Kurt Angle can wrestle again, but we haven't got anything for Luther, so keep him with him for now because he still is heavy. Pointless. You could see why he got, he's just a vacuum of charisma. Utterly useless, mate. Roman Reigns will never have to worry about this guy usurping him and the Reigns family. Don't worry about that. Like, he was just, pointless.
Pointless. He's a worse Wardlow, isn't he? That's what he is.
Yeah, he is. Very similar premise and much worse. But ultimately, it's a great match. It's fantastic. It's everything you want out of a match. I highly recommend people watch it. It's a technical beauty. Absolutely is. If you want a clinic in chain wrestling and simple psychology, it's a phenomenal match. But it just doesn't match up to the WrestleMania matchup. It really doesn't. Not for my money, at least.
Yeah, no, I'd agree, and I don't think they had enough time. They had to rush the story. I really liked the work, working to get his boot off, and Eddie's wrestling with his fucking laces undone and his boots kind of hanging off him, and it's all done so that Angle can tear the boot off. Obviously, in the throwback, the callback to the Mania match, how Eddie won. Slipping out of the boot to get out of the ankle lock and taking the boot off, making sure nothing could happen again. He can't escape and locking that ankle lock in and forcing Eddie to tap. This felt like, and this whole pay-per-view feels like, because of what happens after the main, in the main event as well, like WWE restoring the status quo. Is like, look, we experimented from No Way Out until SummerSlam by having Guerrero and Benoit at the top of the card. And now we're restoring fucking parity. We're going to make sure that Benoit's get off of that title. Let's get it on Randy Orton. And we're going to have, Eddie Guerrero, get back to losing, you Mexican. Kurt Angle's the champ. Kurt Angle's the best. He's the fucking best ever. Look at him. Look how wide he is. I can see my face in his head. It's, but it was still an excellent match. Great psychology. And yeah, two of the best to ever do it. And the fact the fans were just were so shit in this match really fucking infuriated me because this should be the smarktastic match of the year. A rematch from WrestleMania. You've got Eddie Guerrero and Kurt Angle, two of the best out-and-out wrestlers to ever do it, putting on the best technical, athletic presentation that you can hope for on a show. And the fans are fucking booing Eddie Guerrero. It's like, no, not having that. Absolutely not. But it was such a good match. As you say, it was too short. It was 13 minutes or something. It was a really short match for guys who can go out there and tell a story in the way that these two can. When you think their WrestleMania match was half hour plus. WrestleMania match. It was half hour plus. You just think, well, hang on. How has it been halved in length? I don't know if it was to protect Kurt or what, but it was still an absolutely outstanding technical masterpiece. And it's just every time you watch these two go at it, it's a lesson, isn't it? It's just an absolute lesson. A schooling on how to do technical masterpieces. Brilliant stuff.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. A clinic, if you will, in wrestling. This is, by the way, just out of context, 4 out of 5. Thought it was that good. 4 stars still. I thought they could have given you a lot more. That's how good they are. Time for a bit of storyline shenanigans, and as I mentioned, all these matches have been a little bit short, and that's because the game, he needs his time, and you can just see it's like everybody else is cut to 10 minutes. Fuck you. It's Triple H in the rather unique situation of wrestling somebody he really shouldn't be in Eugene. So it's Eugene versus Triple H. Now I will say one thing, the build up to this, the promo package. I fucking hate Eugene. Fuck off. The whole concept of it is fucking disgraceful. It's distasteful. It's disgusting. It's all the dis. However, this is phenomenally well done, actually. And the story being told in this was actually really fucking great. And, oh boy, am I going to set the world alight with this one. First of all, the promo's fantastic. Really gets you in the mood for it. Totally tells you the storyline of it. Love the way Triple H turned. It's jarring and it's really unsettling seeing Evolution kick the shit out of someone who is essentially mentally retarded. That's his gimmick. And they're beating the crap out of him and they bloody him up. Quite nasty, actually, when you look back at it. But actually, it had its desired effect. It created a lot of anger for people. Not for the smarky Toronto people, of course.
Absolutely not.
Wait, they're like, oh, we're going to have some of this. Get the retard. Get him. They just lynch mob with their burning sticks out. I thought this was fucking brilliant. I did. I genuinely thought this was fantastic, this match. Not necessarily from an athletic standpoint, but the emotion of it. And the storytelling and the psychology. And this for me is evidence piece number one when you discuss Triple H and what he gives to wrestling. He is by no means the best wrestler on the card. He is by no means the most athletic man on the card. But there are very few who will go out there and psychologically tell a story like Triple H. And this is why he's more deserving of his position as a wrestler and renowned as a great wrestler than some people might think. Obviously, we had the terror of Triple H and all that nonsense, and we still kind of have it now, but I love this. Him and Eugene went out there and told a fantastic story, and this was a match that benefited from having so much time to it, that benefited from being so strong, and the crowd were into it. They were hot, even though they were all over Eugene, which I thought was hilarious. I genuinely think this is one of the best Triple H matches I've ever seen. Like, from just a standard match. Obviously, his match with Cactus Jack, for me, is probably his greatest match. That's my certain suggestion. I think he's definitely had better matches, but I think this is one of his best. Like, if I had to compile a list of his top 10 matches, because ultimately, and the reason I feel that is because how many people are going to be able to go out there and truly have gold with a guy like this and a gimmick like this? There aren't many. I really don't think so. And I honestly, this is definitely, from what I've seen, Eugene's best match by some margin. He worked really well in this match. He actually was... This is where I thought, wow, Nick Dinsmore actually a lot better than people give him credit for because of this dumb gimmick. And he's made his bed, whatever, he's happy to sleep in it. But ultimately, I sat there and thought, wow, you can see, because he was, believe it or not, OVW champion. He was their guy in developmental. He was Mr. Developmental. He was Mr. NXT for that era. You imagine now, he was their Adam Cole. That's pretty wild to think
Adam
of.
Cole comes out and starts playing a special needs guy.
Oh,
just
my God.
like, fucking hell. Let's not rule it out.
Did you know my partner's a dentist? Yeah, just be amazing. But yeah, I can't be honest. I was ready to shit can this. I was like, oh, you're going to get it. You're going to get it so bad. And ultimately, I actually thought it was fucking excellent. I really did.
Yeah, it was actually a really good match. And this is really comes down to the crux of the problem of Nick Dinsmore was a decent worker. He could wrestle. He could put together good matches, as you say. This is the perfect evidence of it. And the gimmick, if the gimmick was just that he was a crazed super fan, like what they did with Mickie James, like a year later, with Trish Stratus, it would have worked. Of him just like, I fucking love wrestling and I just want to be like The Rock. I'm going to use The Rock's moves and I'm going to use Stone Cold's moves, Triple H's moves. He could have just been that super fan who was using all the moves of the popular guys that had been around in the previous 6 or 7 years or 15 years because he was doing fucking Hulk Hogan stuff and Randy Savage stuff. But instead, they decided to make him like with special needs and like deficiencies. But why? Like, what? It was just so unnecessary and so frustrating because actually the core of the gimmick in terms of being a massive fan of wrestling and wanting to do the stuff of his heroes was there was nothing wrong with that. That was fine and actually made for some really good matches. We said after we saw him in a tag match with Ric Flair at the last show, and we said like actually like his side of things was quite entertaining. Like Ric Flair sold it really well. You know, he did some good in-ring work, and when he was just copying Ric Flair's stuff and paying tribute to Ric Flair, actually he was doing it really well, and it was kind of working. It was popping the crowd. And it was the same, it wasn't popping the crowd, but it was the same sort of thing here, where, you know, he nails the Rock bottom, but obviously he's not the Rock, so he doesn't do it well enough that he's going to get a pin, because Triple H kind of, you know, no-sells it to a certain extent, and because he goes through the people's elbow, and Triple H just gets up and twats it with a spine buster. And they just do some really good stuff. You know, hits the stunner, gets a 2 count, he hits the pedigree, Ric Flair interferes, and it's actually some really good stuff. But ultimately, it was always going to come down to, A, Triple H was always going to win this, and, you know, history is always going to say that was the right winner. It's not that often in this era we say that about a Triple H match, but it absolutely was. But Eugene didn't come out of it looking weak, because he put on a really good showing. And one thing I will say, which again, don't say often in this era, Triple H worked his ass off to make sure Eugene looked as good as possible. He sold everything that he did. He was selling for him really well. And, it made a massive difference. And that's the frustrating thing with Triple H, of too often he went out with an attitude of, this guy doesn't deserve to be in the ring with me, or this guy doesn't deserve to be in the company, which is weirdly what this storyline was. He worked harder for this fucking storyline saying, you don't deserve to be here, to put the guy over, than he did with a person who actually deserved to be there. It's fucking mental. But yeah, it was actually a really fun match. And one thing I will say as well, from the promo package, how fucking great William Regal was as the mentor for Eugene. Like, there's a bit where, you know, Triple H has battered fucking William Regal with a sledgehammer. He's bleeding like a stuck pig. He's like strapped down to the gurney to be wheeled off to the hospital. Triple H comes next to him, like fucking camera's right there, and William Regal's still like fucking staring at him, like, come on, you bastard. I love it. Before Triple H flips the bed over and just puts him on his unprotected face. It was just glorious. That facial expression from William Regal, I fucking hate you. Glorious stuff. Absolutely glorious. Really loved it. It's so weird to say, but it's frustrating, because actually the character of Eugene, if they'd have taken away the special needs and just made him a crazy superfan, that character really could have gone on to be something fantastic in WWE history, rather than one of the most embarrassing parts of WWE history.
Yeah, this is where I dropped the bombshell. 4.25 out of 5. I genuinely think this is a masterpiece in storytelling. I really do. It can't get 5 stars because athletically it just doesn't match up with other things. But yeah, I'm hard pushed to find a better match this year from a storytelling perspective. I really am. And I think if Nick Dinsmore has one moment of pride from his run in this, it's this match, actually. This is the match where he can look back and say, well, you know, I had this. You know, this is the one flake of gold in what is a terrible decision ultimately made by all parties. And fair play to Triple H. It is, like you say, so ironic that Triple H so often would sandbag people and shit can them based on the fact that they just weren't good enough or whatever. And they were, you know, they're beneath me. And ultimately, this match is actually based fictionally on that exact premise. And it delivers in every sense. Also really enjoyed Ric Flair's little bit of involvement as well. Snotty little shitbag coming down as the way he did. I absolutely adored Ric Flair, because Ric Flair's out cold, isn't he? at the end of the match, and there's this wonderful moment where Triple H is just dragging him by a leg up there. Come on, mate, skip. And I just thought that is so telling of how they probably were when they went out on the smash. Flair's out cold by fucking 1 a.m, and there's Trips trying to drag him back to the hotel because they got a fucking live show in a few hours. You can just see him just dragging him away. What an image for me. Ric Flair is so funny. So funny. He's actually, his comedic side of things is forgotten way too often because of the legend he is. Like you say, William Regal, from start to finish, even the contempt and the attitude and him, I loved it when he laid out Ric Flair, and then he immediately was like, Eugene, look out. Like, he genuinely felt like in that moment that he wanted Eugene to succeed. Wow, you know, William Regal is the MVP of that gimmick. He really is. I mean, he put up with a lot of stuff. And, one of the funniest things I've seen from this year is that bit where he's like, Eugene, get out of the women's locker room. And he just turns around to Gail Kim. He's like, hello. I love him so much. Speaking of demeaning women, this. Oh, boy. This. How is this a thing? A women's dodgeball match. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are still covering wrestling. A women's dodgeball match for bragging rights, so to speak. It's Team Dream versus Team Diva. Now then, Team Dream consists of Amy Weber, Joy Giovanni, Trace, no idea, Maria Kanellis, Christy Hemme, and Michelle McCool, versus Team Diva, who seem to have quite the advantage, I'd say, at least from a wrestling standpoint, you'd think. Trish, Molly, Jazz, Stacey Keebler, Gail Kim, Nydia, and Victoria line up the Hall of Famers. Team Dream wins what is one of probably the worst things I've ever seen on WWE television. This is terrible. They can't even play dodgeball properly. What the fuck is this? Explain this to me.
Well, you see, I was watching this, and Becky was watching it at the same, she was in the room, she was reading, and she looked up and she went, the fuck, what's the point of this? And I went, well, it's just like women in small clothes jiggling about. She's like, yeah, but what's the point of it? Well, I think I've just explained that. It's women in small clothes jiggling about. Like, there is no other...
But they're not even wearing sexy clothes, that's the thing.
No, they're not wearing sexy clothes. It's just, like, the Team Dream are mostly in bikinis. And Team Diva are just in like hot pants and relatively low cut, like athletic style tops with Team Diva written on each boob. Like, it's just, it's not good. And again, like, Team Dream gets like a clean sweep, like gets these, like, as you say, Hall of Famers, like, out to nil. Like, none of their team goes out, and it just looks terrible. And it was one of them where I thought, is this when the movie Dodgeball came out? And I was expecting like Ben Stiller to come in or something, or like Vince Vaughn, to try and make this more of a gimmick where they were promoting the film, because there was no real like reasoning behind this. And I think at this point, it's the age of when they had Diva Search on as their like talent show, and they would essentially make really hot Playboy models do really demeaning things to see if they could make it in the WWE. That had absolutely nothing to do with wrestling at all. And this was just another example of it. It was really weird. And then like Trish Stratus starts brawling with people after the match, like in the chairs, to try and make it somewhat wrestling related. It was just shit. And then it cuts back to Jerry Lawler and JR. And Jerry Lawler's first thing that he says is, I can't believe these fans. They're even booing the women. Like, there's complete bizarro world here in Toronto. It's like, no, at least they're right about this. Like, they're right to boo Eugene, and they're right to boo this. It's so shit, so demeaning, and so completely irrelevant to wrestling that it's not even funny. And again, what was weird was you had Coach, like, semi-commentating and refereeing this dodgeball fucking match out of nowhere. And at the last pay-per-view, the last few pay-per-views, he's being presented as a legitimate, credible wrestler. It's so weird what is happening in this era, like, especially if you're not watching every Raw and SmackDown in between to keep tabs. Like, it's just batshit insane. What is anyone doing there? It's such shit. It's so demeaning. And if there was anything that could sum up the waste of time for for what these women were doing, because as much as we mock a little bit, Molly Holly and Gail Kim and like Victoria, they're all like they're legitimately good wrestlers. What are they doing in a spot like this? It was sad to see, to be honest. Like, it was pathetic.
Yeah, it was a fucking tragedy, and words escape me on this one. For the WWE Championship, JBL defends his new one title against The Undertaker. Blimey. This goes on a while. And the longer it goes on, the more Canada is infuriated by the premise. And that just makes it even funnier. Take the reins, mate. What do you think of The Undertaker versus JBL for the WWE title?
I actually thought The Undertaker wrestled in this, and we'd seen him start doing more wrestling, kind of as Big Evil, in sort of his previous gimmick, sort of coming out of the American Badass time. We were actually seeing him being able to do some submission stuff. We'd see him have some really good matches with Kurt Angle, for instance. And he was wanting to work with smaller, more technical guys. And now, obviously, he's not in here with a small or technical guy at all in JBL. He's in here with, like, Hoss. But actually, he works kind of... He does a lot of, like, knee bars, and he was working the arm, the shoulder a lot, then working the knees. Quite a lot of transitions, actually. And that was actually quite cool to see. And the fact the fans were shitting on it was... kind of made it frustrating from that point of view, because from The Undertaker's point of view, as a wrestling performance, I actually thought it was really good. JBL obviously doesn't offer much at all during the course of the match. Like, he's just quite boring to watch. And he has Orlando Jordan floating around as his whatever, like, PR guy or executive assistant or whatever shit made up job. But it's
Secretary of Defense.
Yeah, he's actually fucking... So the whole, again, so Orlando Jordan takes a few bumps, Taker throws him about a little bit. And it's almost as if WWE sat down and said, look, we've got quite a bit of heat. JBL fucking chasing around the border, getting pissed off at Eddie Guerrero. And the whole concept of Mexico and Latin Americans being in the US. So to prove that our champion is not a racist, we'll give him a black assistant. What? What are you doing? This is fucking shit. And then they just finish on like a spot, basically. They just finish with the choke slam, because it finishes in a DQ, because Taker twats JBL in the face with a title belt, getting him back. The referee sees it. And so he choke slams JBL through the roof of JBL's limo. And
State it was of like, your roof, mate.
Yeah, the fucking... It was basically a tent roof. Like, it was made out of paper. Like, it was a good job it wasn't driven outside of the arena, because if it was fucking raining, they'd have been screwed. It was... it didn't look good, to be honest. It looked pretty meh. But yeah, it was okay. It wasn't awful. It was okay. And I thought The Undertaker, as I say, doing the wrestling stuff was always quite cool to see him do that at his size. But it doesn't exactly enthrall me. And the fact doing the Mexican wave throughout as well was fucking annoying. And to be honest, I think the fans took me out of the match a little bit and spoilt my enjoyment as well. But yeah, it wasn't great. And again... So Michael Cole and Taz are on commentary for this one. It's just because it's the World Heavyweight title, two SmackDown guys. Michael Cole isn't very good. And my problem with Michael Cole in this era was he was still almost in his ring announce. He's like backstage interviewer persona a little bit, where he's not very good at putting across emotion. He's like interviewing Taz effectively throughout the course of the match. And, when there's a big spot, it's almost like he talks with surprise. So it's like, well, that was a choke slam from The Undertaker. Like, what are you... He's just... His inflections are all wrong, and there's no drama in his voice at all. It's almost like he's being sarcastic about stuff that's happening in the ring. And it's just rubbish. Like, Taz isn't too bad. Taz is okay. But Michael Cole is just fucking wank at this point of his career, to be honest. Still very early, still very green. He gets to a point where he's actually pretty good, and then obviously he gets spoiled completely. Like, he never fulfills his potential, as we know, but in this, again, he just really detracts from the match for me. But I thought it was a solid middle-of-the-road match. I'd probably give it 2.5, but it's, Michael Cole is fucking toss.
Yeah, I've had that opinion for a long time, if I'm being honest. I'm slightly more positive, but not too much more than you. I actually did think this was quite good, especially because I do not expect anything from JBL. He's just not a very good wrestler. One thing that really astonished me was how big he is. you forget how big JBL is? He's not that far off Taker. He's only about a couple of inches shorter than him.
Yeah, he's like 6'6" or 6'7".
He's a fucking unit. Yeah. He's a fucking unit. He's sizable, and it looked believable when he was clubbing Undertaker. Undertaker was selling it, and I appreciate that. And ultimately, this match comes down to Undertaker making him look, far better than he probably ever could make himself look. And that's kind of the run of JBL, actually, as WWE Champion. Now, the character is very divisive and ultimately quite racist now, but he delivered it quite well. As much as I hate JBL and I hate all the fucking disgusting things that he's rumored to have done, I will give him credit. He was very committed to making this character as believable as possible. Mainly because he probably is just an obnoxious Donald Trump-like racist. But ultimately, he did a good job with it for what it was. But it's a case of this character should never have been a WWE champion. This is my biggest problem with it. There's nothing wrong with JBL's character from a wrestling standpoint, obviously not, being a human being. But it just isn't good enough to be where they think it is. And it feels like, JBL's one of the boys, so, give him this, give him that. And I like this match. I thought it was very physical. Too long. Way too long, I thought. I actually think this match would have probably pushed towards 4 stars for me if it had been about 10 or 15 minutes long. 10 minutes maybe, because it was very punch-kicky. It was very brawling. But like you say, Undertaker spliced in some nice technical stuff. He looked determined to make this a real event, and I really admired that. The crowd do take you out of it. You are absolutely spot on with that. They are so shitty towards this match. Probably more so than they are anything else. The Edge thing is jarring, but they don't, completely dominate it with booing and disgust. However, with this match, can you imagine saying to this modern era of wrestling fans, this current generation, oh yeah, people used to go and watch The Undertaker and do Mexican waves because they were bored by his matches. It just doesn't happen. This is probably the only time I think I've ever seen it. This kind of, deliberate hijacking for Undertaker, at least. And yeah, it's a weird thing for me. It's a weird thing. I thought this was better than it had any right to be, but ultimately it just went on a bit too long. Originally, I gave it 3.5. I've downgraded that to 3. I think it's good. It's a good brawl. This is the kind of match that you'll enjoy more if you watch it while pissing about on your phone or something. I know it's terrible to say, but if you watch it sort of while kind of being distracted by something else, it actually ends up being a lot better, you say. And also, Orlando Jordan is just so comical. He just looks like a tiny little rat. Just trying to get involved, and it's like, go away. Nobody cares. It's like a little boy hanging around 2 massive behemoths at school. It's like a year 7 hanging around with 2 year 11s. Very strange to look at, and it just doesn't work. And yeah, there's good and bad for this match, but it's not terrible by any means. It's a half decent match. If you're a brawling type wrestler, and for a fact that you're not exactly shrouded in technical brilliance, this is probably quite a good match to watch. It's a very good example of how you can do very little but still create a half-decent match. So, it's looking at it from a positive standpoint. I certainly think Undertaker and JBL have had far worse matches than this. Far, far worse. So I'm not ultimately going to shit on it too much, to be fair. So fair enough. It's not too bad. Yeah, I'll tell you what, they should have stopped with the image of him going through the windshield, because that actually looked really cool. I actually thought that was a really good image when he cracked the windscreen. Yeah, I think he should have been chokeslammed on. Yeah, I think he should have been chokeslammed on there, and it was actually just like he was thrown onto the bonnet and it cracked the windscreen. It was like him laying, as you say, him laying on the screen was a better image. But it would have been cool if he'd have gone through the windscreen with a cooler move. Do you know what I mean? They sort of, ended up being a bit half-assed. But yeah, I think if they'd ultimately done that, it would have been far more believable and entertaining. I think that would have been the spot that would have really made it for a lot of people. So, it is what it is, but it's not too bad. But it's not your main event. Once again, the WWE Championship finds itself falling down the pecking order a little bit too much. So, it's time for Evolution. Randy Orton, finally, is he going to fulfill his destiny as the youngest ever World Heavyweight Champion as he goes up against, I've never seen this man before, Redacted, Chris Benoit defends the World Heavyweight Championship against Randy Orton in... This is a weird one. I like this match, but I don't love it. And it doesn't feel... Do you know what? I remembered this moment. I remember Randy Orton winning the world title and thinking, wow, what a moment. I was gobsmacked. And I think the reason is because for anyone who probably watched it, I remember it being such a big deal. The idea of someone like Randy Orton becoming champion at the time was just not something that I think anyone believed. I remember watching it and thinking, oh, Randy Orton's not going to be Chris Benoit, is he? He's Randy Orton. Like, you know, he's a good wrestler, but he's a mid-card guy. You know, he's an IC champion. And here he is, climbing the mountain. And in the main event, this is when I realised, with hindsight, yeah, he's definitely one of Tripp's boys, wasn't he? Definitely. This is a moment that's been given to him because he gets on well with the boys. And, yeah, Chris Benoit does a good job here. We said, didn't we, on previous podcasts, it's time for Chris Benoit. You know, our realisation is that this title run just isn't nearly as good as everyone thinks it is and remembers it to be. There's an interesting kind of side note and caveat. We basically, I don't know if you've probably noticed this, on our social media, we do a On This Day in wrestling. Just something fun, you know, just to put some content out there. And just recently, it was the anniversary of Chris Benoit winning the Royal Rumble. And it was really fascinating because when I put this video up on Facebook, I wasn't really expecting to get too much traction. It's had over 1 million interactions overall, including likes and views. Wild. Absolutely wild. This thing has blown up. And one of the big things that people have said about it is that, I cannot, you know, I've totally forgotten just how incredible he was because of his reputation and things like that. And actually, if you just watch this year, this is arguably, for me, one of his less impressive years of work and volumes of work. And I think you could see why they put the belt on Randy Orton. I think it was time to take the belt off of him. I don't think it really worked that well. And ultimately, a lot of that might be to do with the fact that he was less charismatic. But as a match, I thought this was a good, solid match. A lot of it because it was actually quite short for a main event, wasn't it? Like, I was a little bit stunned at how little time they were
about 20 minutes, I think.
Yeah, I mean, which for the main event for the World Heavyweight title and for a big title change is actually not that long. And because of that, I thought it was reasonably entertaining. It was very smooth, it was very solid, and it was very typical of a Randy Orton match, very methodical. But yeah, I love the way he hits the RKO out of nowhere, and they kind of made that a thing. And I thought, oh, that's awesome. But ultimately, I wasn't as overwhelmed with it the second time around. This was, believe it or not, this is only the second time I'd ever watched this match. I've only ever watched it the one time when I watched it live. And ultimately, watching it the second time around already, not as overwhelmed with the enormity of what has just happened, essentially. The idea of this young 24, 25-year-old guy at the time becoming the youngest ever WWE champion, or world champion. Yeah, it was good. It was good, but it wasn't the earth-shattering moment I wanted it to be. How did it strike with you?
Yeah, similar. I think it was more about the moment at the end where, you know, Randy's climbed to the top of the mountain and been given the torch, so to speak, not for a huge amount of time, but he's been given the torch. And obviously, at the last Raw pay-per-view we saw, he was dropping the IC title to Edge. And he's gone from losing in the mid-card to winning in the main event of SummerSlam the WWE title for the first time, which is pretty rapid kind of step to take. But again, this was an era where the IC title was the stepping stone title to, you know, it was the proving ground to take you to the main event. It was more about the moment. I thought the match was okay. I don't think it was anything special at all. You know, I thought it was a middle-of-the-road match. I thought it was all right.
Main event of Raw, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, if this had been for the IC title, maybe, in the middle of the card, maybe I'd have rated it a bit higher. But I think when you're talking about, a WWE title match in the main event of SummerSlam, which is probably your best wrestling pay-per-view of the year, historically speaking, I just thought that it was okay. I don't think it was match of the night. You know, Kurt Angle and Eddie Guerrero probably took that. I thought it was okay and no better than that. The problem to me, and it's with the way that both of these guys have been presented up to this point, and even after this point as well, particularly in the case of Benoit, it did feel like two mid-card guys in the main event. And that's maybe, again, it just takes me out. I really like Benoit. I think Benoit was a phenomenal worker. You know, from a technical standpoint, his intensity and his aggression and all of those things that we love about Benoit. As a ring worker, bell to bell, he's one of the best ever. No doubt about that. But he still didn't really carry himself as champion, and he never really carried the belt that well. Part of that was to do with booking. The creative around him wasn't great, and that any creative was difficult around him because of his charisma. It's obviously difficult when you're in there, you know, out with won it, and then his first defense, or his first, or two, I think probably 2 out of 3 of his defenses and winning the belt were Triple H on pay-per-view. So that always is going to make it tricky for you, even if you're going over. You're never going to come out of it feeling like or looking like a massive star, because Triple H isn't going to necessarily allow that. Then he had Kane, which is always, you know, tricky. And again, it wasn't a bad match. He didn't have bad matches. It's just none of them were mind-blowing. And he was capable of better. He was capable of more. And it's frustrating, really, that you didn't have, you know, Eddie Guerrero as one of his challengers. I said before, it would have been great to see him have a feud with Jericho at the top. That would have been great. It's a shame that we didn't have Kurt Angle on there and renew that rivalry for the WWE Championship. You know, he was on the wrong show. He had the wrong belt. In a lot of ways, I think Eddie Guerrero, as much as he did great stuff with Kurt Angle, and, you know, he was always going to struggle with JBL. And anyone and everyone did. But I actually think if they had been on different shows, Eddie Guerrero would have almost been better in there with Triple H and Shawn Michaels, because of his level of charisma was so undeniable. And he would have gone out there and done well with Kane. He would have gone out there and done brilliantly with Randy. And putting Benoit in there with Angle, I don't know. I just felt that some of the booking didn't help Benoit. They didn't play to his strengths as a champion. And to me, if you'd have put him in there with other great technicians who were going to wrestle a technical style and have Benoit dominate that way, I think that would have played to his strengths. And that didn't really happen. And it was essentially an experiment. I don't think it was a complete failure, but it wasn't a blazing success either, by any stretch of the imagination. And again, Randy's was an experiment. It was a test, his title run, as we'll come to discuss. And it was the beginning of it. But Randy's had, up to this point, a pretty solid year. Obviously, you know, he's been part of some tag matches with Evolution. He's had this phenomenal rivalry with Mick Foley, which has probably been the best feud of the year. You know, arguably the match of the year to this point, other than maybe Eddie and Kurt. Had an absolutely phenomenal match with Cactus Jack. So we've seen like this continued rise, you know, a really good run as IC champion. And now he's got to the top of the mountain as WWE champion in a solid match in the main event of a Big Four pay-per-view. You know, we called this, as we started off 2004, the year of Orton. And this is obviously the culmination of that. This is the high point of that. And it's kind of a little bit downhill from here. But I thought it was a solid match. But again, with the two guys in the ring that are there and the legacy they have in terms of their in-ring work, neither one necessarily, it wasn't the barn burner that maybe you would have expected it to be. It was all right. You know, again, it was probably 3 stars. You know, it was all right. Nothing wrong with it at all. It was a good match. But it just didn't blow me away. And again, it just felt like it was more about the moment at the end of the match than the match itself.
Yeah, I've got 3.5, but I'm inclined to downgrade it to 3 like you. In retrospect, it just didn't quite hit the mark the way I think they and us really wanted it to be or perceived it to be. Very much like Chris Benoit's title run. I do agree with you. They didn't play to his strengths. And now that I've had a chance to listen to your thoughts on him and stuff like that, do you know what I've realised? His incredible body of work was all in the Intercontinental title division. If you look at how special he was, a lot of that centered around the IC belt. Remember his rivalry with Chris Jericho, the ladder match at Royal Rumble 2001, the triple threat match between Angle, Jericho, and Benoit at WrestleMania, which was, you know, at a WrestleMania that was terrible. An incredible match. Benoit versus Angle, WrestleMania 17, and then the following submission match as well, the Iron Man submission match at Backlash. Wow. Like, the collection of matches he had were all as a mid-carder or a guy who could hang with anyone, but was the wrestler. You know, he's worked with Eddie as an IC champion, European champion, that kind of stuff. He was arguably the greatest mid-card wrestler of all time that won a world heavyweight title. It's very kind of weird. Like, yeah. I would argue that he's probably the greatest mid-card wrestler ever. I really would. But, you know, like you say, here's a guy who is pretty much peerless as a technical wrestler, bar one or two in the entire history of wrestling. And he's thrown out there as a character and as a entertainer. And he's asked to wrestle guys who are entertainers. And I get it. I absolutely understand why. Because the Office is thinking, well, if we don't put him in with Triple H or Kane or guys that have larger-than-life personas, he's going to drown out there as a character. We need people to carry him. Well, actually, it would have worked the other way around. You should have, you know, the WWE title's got plenty of character around it. It's got Eddie Guerrero around it. It's got JBL on it. The first thing they should have done, as soon as Eddie dropped that belt to JBL, is shipped him over to Raw. Immediately switched him over to Raw and had him go after Chris Benoit. Chris Benoit saying, like, I pulled a lot of strings to get you over here. You're one of my best friends. Maybe have him turn on him as, you know, the sneaky little lying, cheating, stealing bastard, whatever. There were so many different things they could have done with Benoit that they didn't. And ultimately, it's not his fault. He went out there and had good matches with good characters. But he was never given, if you look at this entire run, the only guy who could really wrestle well was Shawn Michaels, and he was always involved in that triple threat scenario. So it's not like Shawn Michaels really had that opportunity. And if actually, I took the liberty of going back and watching the match they had on Raw. Remember they mentioned it before the last pay-per-view that he took on Shawn Michaels? Sort of singles match for the title. It's phenomenal. It's actually by far and away the best match I saw him have for the title because, you know, Shawn Michaels is selling his ass off. He's terrified of the chops and things. It's really good. It's really worth a watch. Just put in Benoit HBK and you'll find it. And yeah, I'm disappointed because this is essentially where we stop really reminiscing about Chris Benoit, the wrestler. And his great run because he'd never really climbed the mountain again. He never really got close. You know, a lot of people said that he was kind of primed and ready to be BCW champion, but it's not really a big thing, is it? Let's be honest. So, you know, it ends here and as a world champion. And ultimately, I think this run has been romanticized far more than it actually should be. It's not that good of a run. It's not terrible by any means, but like you say, it didn't blow any doors open. And when I think back about the great all-time reigns as a champion, whether that be a WWE or World Heavyweight Champion, this is quite low down the pecking order. I can think of a lot of different people that have had incredible special reigns, a lot more than this. And ultimately, I think, you know, the reason I brought up that Facebook post is because I was astonished at how many people had an outpouring of emotion in some form or fashion for this. You know, it got quite divisive. People, you know, you can go on there and read the comments. People, you know, just tearing into each other. How dare you remember him so fondly? You know, some people saying that they miss him, that they love him, that wrestling's never been the same since he's gone. And ultimately, you know, our opinions on that, we've shared those. And, you know, there's no getting away from the fact that what he did was pure evil and he should not be remembered for that. But from just a wrestling standpoint, he is one of the most incredibly divisive men in history. And, you know, for what he did for technical wrestling, he ultimately almost buried wrestling entirely as an entertainment format in the fallout of what he did. So, you know, we could talk for hours about Chris Benoit, but ultimately SummerSlam, I actually really enjoyed watching. Nothing was bad. Nothing was terrible, apart from the volleyball. Fucking hell. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. Actually, for me, the best pay-per-view I've watched of 2004. By some margin, I think. I don't think it's even close, personally. I loved it. I thought it was really good. I thought this was the show that WrestleMania could have and should have been, in a lot of ways. It didn't have a great deal of star power in its matchups either. And that's why I think workers are really important. Because I'm looking back at this show and thinking, ultimately, all the good stuff on there was from guys who worked well, as opposed to guys who were just out-and-out superstars. You know, Triple H and Eugene, for me, is the match of the night. I think that speaks volumes about the work rate. Because if I said that to somebody, they'd be like, oh, God, it must have been fucking terrible. Actually, no, it was actually quite good. I really enjoyed it. I really did. I thought, you know, out of everything I've seen of this year, I've been pretty disenchanted with the last 2 or 3 pay-per-views. And this one, actually, I thought was pretty excellent, especially by the standards of what they had. And I thought the matches were consistently excellent. It was a good quality of match from start to finish. Everyone put in a real shift. There was definitely a team ethos here of, this is the second biggest pay-per-view of the year. Let's go out there and fucking leave everything there. And even guys that you think, the Dudleys or a Billy Kidman or whatever, people that are okay, but you don't necessarily fall in love with, they all went out there and put in a real shift to make this show decent viewing. And very rare, there are a couple of matches that are a bit short and a bit meh, but nothing was a dud. There was nothing really tragic about this show. Everyone delivered a certain level of quality, and ultimately the good points far outweighed the bad. So I actually thought it was a decent SummerSlam. It's definitely been better SummerSlams, but I actually thought this was pretty good fun. I really enjoyed watching this, and it went by quite smoothly.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I agree. I think it was the best show comfortably that we've seen so far, because we have seen some duds. And the thing is, on every show that we've watched, including Mania, there was just fucking terrible matches on there, or really awful segments. And you only had one really awful segment, as you say, the volleyball, which was fucking horrendous. The fans did their best to ruin this show for me. Like, they tried their best to take me out of it. But ultimately, there were some good matches, and there were no bad matches on the card, and everyone out there and did their job, as you say. And it's something which actually, as we, when we finish this era, and it's something we've mentioned up to this point, there's not really any superstars in this era that feel like massive superstars. John Cena isn't yet there at this point, and he's not positioned that way as he would come to be. For me, Triple H has never felt like that guy. Chris Jericho has never been positioned as that guy. Edge wasn't the number one guy yet by any stretch of the imagination. Shawn Michaels wasn't even positioned in that way, even though he was probably the biggest star. He wasn't even on this card. Kurt Angle is the guy who comes close, but again, he's more of a worker. It's an interesting one. Like, with Brock being gone, and even to an extent as ridiculous as it is to say, considering I'm not a fan of his at all, Goldberg, like, they still felt like they had a level of star power. Like, they had an aura or a presence about them where you're like, oh yeah, okay, that's like, that's a huge star, it's a huge name now. And we just, there hasn't been like a ready-made replacement who's instantly stepped up. Like, the fact they've positioned JBL as like the heir to Brock Lesnar almost is kind of the ridiculous nature of where we're at in 2004, particularly in the second half of the year. So, I thought it was a really good show, actually, and I think we've got Unforgiven up next. So, we shall dive into that bad boy next week. But it's just a really, really bizarre year, 2004. Some really good stuff, some really terrible stuff. And it's weird looking back because there's so much stuff that we've forgotten. And actually, I'd forgotten about this Eddie Guerrero Kurt Angle match, to be honest, because we all talk about the match at Mania, and actually this was another, as much as it was too short and stuff, it was another fantastic match. And if I was going to say to anyone, particularly, a smarky person, to go back and watch a match back from this card, that would be the match I'd recommend. Just do it with the volume down, because Michael Cole's shit and the crowd are wankers.
Yeah, it's funny to think that the crowd were one of the people say like, back in the day, crowds didn't interfere. Crowds just enjoyed what they were given. Actually, they didn't, at least in 2004. And, it's got to get hotter with the ECW moment, of course, at One Night Stand and things. And this has at least got me back on track and made me feel a little bit more positive about 2004, because the last few shows have been quite jaded, and I've genuinely sat there and felt like Great American Bash was a real chore. Yeah, and there were a couple of things where I just thought, God, this is becoming a bit of a chore. And a bit of a fucking, not a mistake, obviously, because, we still entertain and people still seem to like it. So, people just turn it off and go, nope, that's when we know that we're going wrong here. But, yeah, it can be quite exhausting having to watch stuff like this sometimes. And, yeah, I enjoyed this show, actually. Thought it was quite good from top to bottom. If you're somebody who's sitting there at home listening to this and thinking, like, wouldn't mind watching a bit of retro wrestling, this is a show that you'll get a fair amount of enjoyment out of, I think. There's plenty of carny bollocks and idiocy to keep you entertained, and there's also some really good fucking wrestling as well. This was classic WWE. Get the carny nonsense right, and you can get away with it. Get it wrong, and it's terrible, and luckily for us, they got it right on this occasion. So yeah, not too bad. Onwards to Unforgiven, the second Unforgiven we are covering on Manic Mondays. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any opinions or any thoughts on what we've been covering or what you'd like us to cover next going forward, we most likely will take a decent sized break after this run, because obviously it's been quite a long run for you, and myself and Steve have, loads of projects and things coming up and stuff to do. So ultimately, when we do get back to Manic Mondays later down the line, we want to know what you want us to cover. We want to know your thoughts and everything. And if you have any memories of 2004, you're still welcome to send them in, and we will endeavour to cover them on the podcast in some format or fashion. So don't hesitate to contact us at WrestlePlug across all social media platforms. Steve Neal, thank you very much for joining me to discuss SummerSlam 2004.
Pleasure, man. And now I actually genuinely mean that this time, rather than some of the other times where it's been more of a chore. So yeah, no, it was good. It was good.
Yeah, it's rare to actually get the pleasure that you want from wrestling in this era. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening to Manic Mondays. We will catch you very soon for more nonsense involving Unforgiven 2004. Until then, look after yourselves and enjoy yourselves, and have a wonderful evening or afternoon wherever you may be and whatever you may be doing.